Palestinian poet Fadwa Khan once said, "Give us wings to open the horizons of ascent, to break free from our confined cavern, the solitude of iron walls." For 76 years, Palestinians have been fighting to break free from the confines and the iron walls of Israeli settler colonialism. For over a century, Palestinians have rejected British colonization and complicity in our land, a complicity and active participation which continues to this day as Britain funnels weapons and military artillery and resources into the regime that it birthed. Over decades, Palestinian resistance has manifested itself in our physical defiance, in the depths of our prison cells and the crowded refugee camps, in the besieged crevices of Gaza. Palestinian resistance resides within our creative spaces, within our academic realms. It flows through the rubble of our decimated homes, in the warmth of a final hug between a Palestinian mother and her martyred child. It beats within the hearts of those on the front line of resistance, raised under brutal subjugation, under relentless occupation, and who took it within their own hands to rise up against the occupying power itself. Resistance fuels our desire for freedom. It grips our collective consciousness and recalibrates us whenever we deviate from the pursuit of liberation. Our resistance gives far more than it takes, and it seeps into our very beings as Palestinians, so that our existence itself is resistance itself. Despite the demonization from Western governments, the message you should take from me today is that despite all that we have suffered, the tens of thousands of Palestinians slaughtered in Gaza, the hundreds murdered in Lebanon, the persistence of colonial collaboration between Britain and Israel, despite all of this, resistance is alive and well. We still reject Zionist corruption across occupied Palestine. We continue to expel Zionist infiltration. We are witnessing this expulsion in southern Lebanon, and they are doing this by any and all available means. The air of revolution persists. It clings, it engulfs it all. It engulfs the checkpoints, the scores of armed settlers priding themselves on their violent colonial ideology and the false entitlement it brings. It engulfs the trails of Palestinian blood and the cells containing the revolutionary masses who are imprisoned for refusing to be imprisoned. It engulfs the remnants of bodies eviscerated by US-made bunker bombs in the streets of Lebanon. No, October the 7th did not exist in a vacuum. It did not happen in a vacuum. Palestinian and anti-Zionist resistance existed before, and it exists now, and it will continue to exist until we witness we have achieved and attained the unattainable. What is seemingly unattainable now is truly attainable, and we will continue to rise up until we witness that freedom has been obtained. We fight in the name of all those who have been killed, who have been starved, who have been imprisoned by Israel long before October the 7th. And in the brutal aftermath, we resist in honor of Palestinian martyrs whose bodies to this day have not been returned to their loved ones. We say glory to Palestine Action, those on the ground in Britain, breaking the chain of mass murder machinery manufactured for use against our people. We channel the spirit of those in Palestine and Lebanon and Yemen who refuse to succumb to the threats and oppression of colonial tyrants. The spirit of revolution encompasses it all, for we are not defined by oppression. We are defined by our adamance to live life in defiance of this oppression. In the words of Mahmoud Darwish, على هذه الأرض ما يستحق الحياة. We have on this land what makes life worth living, and life is worth living. Palestinian life is worthy of living, and that is why we resist. كانت تسمى فلسطين، صارت تسمى فلسطين. It was called Palestine, and it will be called Palestine. It was, it is, it will always be Palestine. The blood of Palestinian martyrs and the sacrifice of all those on the front line of resistance has assuredly not been in vain. Palestine, and our work is not done until Palestinian freedom floods every crevice between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea. And until that day, سنقاوم لحتى نشاهد حرية فلسطين من النهر للبحر. We will resist, we will resist, we will resist until we witness the freedom of Palestine from the river to the sea. From the river to the sea. From the river to the sea. From the river to the sea.
The real question is not why, but how could they not? How could a people whose land, history and rights have been stolen remain silent? Resistance in Palestine is not just a choice, it is the only path left when injustice becomes too great to bear, when to remain silent is to disappear. In the face of such monumental oppression, the Palestinian people have not surrendered, and they will never surrender. They resist. They resist, not only through armed struggle, but with their very existence, their culture, their voices, and their unshakable will to live in freedom. And this resistance is reflected in the poetry of their struggle. Fadwa Tuqan, one of Palestine's greatest poets, captured this spirit in her powerful words. And I would first like to read you her poem, They're Only Boys. They're only boys, playing games of war and death, building houses of stones and skulls, and asking when the foreigners leave the city. They're only boys, they know not what they do. When the stones fall, they raise them again, build houses for tomorrow's ghosts of freedom and of peace. Their future is the exile they carry in their pockets, the land they do not know, the homes they've never seen. They're only boys who do not understand. But do they not understand? These boys, these children, know far more than the world thinks. They understand the pain of loss, the weight of occupation, the fear of living under siege. They understand that their stones and chants are their only weapons in a world that has forgotten them. Their resistance, even if born in the hands of a child, is not a cry for war. It is a cry for survival, for dignity, and for life itself. And Palestine, this land that has seen so much suffering, is more than just geography. It is life itself. It is identity. It is history. It is the mother, the sister, the home that has nurtured generation after generation of resistance.
We are here in the belly of the beast. We are here in the imperial core. We must not stop resisting. 1 year on, 2 year on, 3 years, 4 years. Why? Because what is 10 years and what is 20 years against the 100 years of colonization that Palestine has suffered? Nothing. Nothing.
My name's Adam Ma'anit. I'm British Israeli. I live in Brighton, but my cousin Tahi, same age as me, he lives in Nahal Oz near the Gaza border. And on October 7th, the terrorists gained entry to Nahal Oz. They took Tomer, a 17-year-old boy, at gunpoint and went house to house searching for any people hiding. My family were hiding in the bomb shelter. Bomb shelters in Nahal Oz, anywhere in that region, are designed for rockets and not designed for intrusion. So when the terrorists came door to door, they heard Tomer's voice. They knew that he was being coerced. In the end, it ended up that they ignored Tomer's call, saying that they should come out. They stayed hiding. The terrorists shot through the door after getting frustrated. My cousin Sahi and his firstborn daughter, Mayan, who had just turned 18. The balloons from her birthday party were still up in the house. They were both barricading the door to protect the family. The terrorists shot through the door. They shot Mayan in the head, and she died instantly. Tsahi at first didn't know who got hit. He shouts out who gets hit. He looks down. He sees his firstborn bleeding out onto the floor. His wife and his other two kids. He has another third who was in Tel Aviv at the time, but two of his smallest kids, Yael and Shachar, were 12 and 9, were with him. The terrorists they took them all out to the sitting room. They forced Gali, Mayan's mother, Tsahi's wife, to unlock her phone so they could live stream it onto her Facebook. And that's how most of my family found out what happened. They live streamed the horror of my family. The clip from that live stream became viral on social media. It became one of the early video clips that was circulating around the internet from the October 7th massacre. In the clip that was widely circulated, the two children, Yael and Shachar, were talking to the terrorists in English because the terrorists were trying to shut them up. They were trying to tell them to shut up because they were crying. They just lost their sister. They watched her being murdered. And the youngest one, Shachar, 9, the boy, he was crying hysterical. Tsahi's there looking very shocked, the blood of his firstborn all over him. Gali, a lioness, just trying to protect her two surviving children. And Yael bravely talks to the terrorists in English, explaining that they can't shut up because you just killed their sister. And the terrorists respond to her in English, she's with your God now. After a couple of hours of being held in the house, the terrorists kind of used that house as a base because it was so close to the entrance of the community. They brought the neighbors, the Miran family, over with their two small children, Alma and Roni, they're 1 and 3, and Nishai, his wife, and Omri. And eventually they took Omri and Tsahi to Gaza. They frog marched them barefoot into Gaza, where that was the last time we ever saw them. The only time we've ever seen anything was when Hamas sent a video, psychological kind of warfare type video, where they kind of taunt us with the hostages, and we saw Tsahi in one of those videos where he was looking very gaunt and pale and thin and bleary-eyed, but alive. But they say in the video that he's dead, but we don't ever see the body, so we're presuming he's still alive, and they're just trying to torture us. I've met several world leaders. I was in the UN last week. I met several dignitaries. I was in 10 Downing Street last week. I met the Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister. I say the same thing to every world leader. I say it to myself. I think none of us have done enough. You've not done enough. My Israeli government hasn't done enough. My British government hasn't done enough. The United Nations hasn't done enough. And we know that because they're still not back. Our hostages are not home. And that's how we know that we've not done enough.
How does it feel when people say Free Palestine to you?
It depends on the context, and it certainly depends on what they mean. We often hear it when we're doing our memorial service in Brighton. We do a memorial service every day at 6:30 in a public park, and we dedicate each night to a different victim of October 7th, and we tell their story. And all we do is we're there to grieve the victims of the 1,200 victims who were murdered on October 7th, and we try to humanize the stories, the victims. And each victim, each night we dedicate to a different person. And then while we're doing that service, someone might cycle by, sometimes with Deliveroo gear on, and say Free Palestine at us. Now that just doesn't feel like actually a genuine kind of moment of dialogue. That sounds like abuse and harassment. That's there to intimidate us, and we're not going to be intimidated by it. My message to the world is the same that I give to every single world leader. Please keep the hostages first and foremost in your minds. I will also say that the fact that the hostages are not home is the reason why we're stuck in crisis, and it is also a way out of the crisis. If we can bring the hostages home, we can begin to start to imagine new pathways. We can start to pivot, we can heal, we can get ourselves out of this crisis and resolve many of the issues that people have. If you want to talk about all of the other things that people want, ceasefire, aid, peace, 2 states, whatever, none of that's possible without the hostages being returned home. And the reason why they're not home yet is because people have been stuck in this idea that everything has to be bargained with. My cousin is not a bargaining chip. The 101 hostages still held in Gaza are not bargaining chips. They're human beings. They're fathers, they're sons, they're brothers. They're human beings who just want to be returned to their families. Many of them are dead. We know they're not being well treated. 6 of the hostages that were recovered recently were found with signs of torture and abuse, riddled with bullet holes. Edin Ural Shami, a 26-year-old young woman, was found at 36 kilograms in weight. She should be double that as a 26-year-old young woman with a whole life ahead of her. We know that every day that the hostages are not home, their lives are in jeopardy. Bring them home, and we'll start to begin to imagine new pathways.
One last thing, sir. How do you feel about people that have remained silent throughout this entire thing, or have said they're neutral?
I don't have a problem with that because, these are complex issues for a lot of people. My only thing I would say to them is that the hostages are not a political issue. The hostages are a humanitarian issue. They've been there for a year in these dark, dingy tunnels. We know they're not well treated. They've never been visited by the Red Cross. They've never been visited by a diplomat or an emissary of the UN. We know that their return should only be seen as a humanitarian issue. Hostages have been released in the past on humanitarian grounds. After a year in captivity, every single one of those hostages is a humanitarian issue, and they should be released immediately.
Idiots of the day, ladies and gentlemen.
Why am I being roughed up? Okay. I'm going that way though. No, my house is that way. Wallah, my house is that way. I promise my house is that way. I promise. I won't go back in. I don't want to go through again. Can I go that way?
Two officers dealing with at the moment. He's told this person he's also got 2 male filming us and the interaction.
I'm fine to walk away on. I've done nothing illegal. Have I done anything illegal?
Listen,
I'm just asking.
do you want to find out why, or do you want to overtalk us? You want to listen?
I understand. I'm apologising for that. I understand what you guys are. That's my hearing. Thank you for being respectful. If I don't have to give my details, I'm not obliged to give my details. Come on. I'm not can you all answer that? Excuse me, do you know if I'm obliged to give my details? Am I obliged to give my details? Can you answer that question?
Are you going to talk? Are you going to keep talking? Are you going to let me take?
Did I listen? So can I ask my question?
You're going to let me talk and explain?
Let him finish talking and then we'll answer his question.
Am I obliged to give my details?
So I'll explain, Sean. So when you were in there, your action was part of breach of the offence. So we're removed from there. You said you beat the offence that you didn't time to potential breach of the peace. Yeah, because of breach of the peace.
I would love to specify.
Listen, do you want to find out what?
I'm being respectful.
Yeah, you are.
No problem. What? I'm not trying to do this.
No. Do you know what the offence is?
Sure.
Do you know what the offence is? You want to know, so you don't want to know.
Sir,
You don't want to
It
know.
seems like I can only talk to you. You're a good gentleman as well. But I've listened to you. I'm trying to be respectful.
Yeah, I've explained to you. I've explained to you. So we had the breach of the peace being committed. We've removed you from the area. Right, go that way.
That's fine.
Cheerio.
You're top of the thank you.
Gaza and in Beirut, very happy that you're here.
I mean, the people of Gaza are dying every day. The people of
Gaza being bombed, their land is being taken. I don't agree with that.
So would you join me in the call to tell these nasty tunnel-dwelling terrorists to return every single hostage? Would you?
I'm just simply here with the phone.
No, but would you say?
Should they return the children? Should they return the children? It's a simple question. Should they return the children who they've kept away from their parents for 365 days? Should they return the children? It's a simple question. Should Hamas return the children?
Should Hamas return the children?
Their parents, the hostages? Yes or no? Simple answer.
You can't
yes
go on,
no?
answer it, I dare you.
Should they return the children?
Let's not shout. Let's not shout.
Yes or no?
Go on, answer it, you disgusting person.
It's a simple yes or no question.
Piece of
Should
wood.
they return the children? Why are you avoiding the question? Should they return the hostages?
Should they return the hostages?
Who have been kept there? Should they return the children? Simple. Yes or no? Don't evade the question. It's a yes or no.
Give her a chance to answer, everyone. Should we return the hostages?
I just personally believe that centering everything on this discussion
yes
no,
or no?
but this is why we answer it.
No, why no?
You
Why
are
no?
supporting the tunnel-dwelling
That's
terrorists who
disgusting.
murder children in their cribs.
Can I ask a question? Can I ask a question?
Yes, go on.
How do you stop killing on both sides?
Well, very easily. They need to get rid of this dangerous ideology of Islamism that they think every Jew is a cyborg enemy. They do not value Jewish lives the same way they would value, say, an Arab life or a Muslim life. They just don't value it.
Right. And if Hamas and Hezbollah would just lay down their weapons, if Hamas and Hezbollah would lay down their weapons, there would be end of it. That would be the end of it. The Jews wouldn't kill anybody.
Stop firing rockets. Use the aid money rather than paying people for killing people. Give.
In a dark tunnel without his mother, without anything, probably, God forbid.
Palestinians, it's like 40,000. It's like so many.
What were you saying?
I was saying that imagine this woman here, she wants children. Imagine if.
You're a fucking embarrassment, you're a disgrace. You're from here, you're not from there. You're nothing to do with this.
Move back across to the other side, please.
You don't know what war is.
Yeah, sure. Is there anything you want to say before I leave?
I personally, amongst all this chaos, simply believe that genocide is wrong.
Sorry?
I simply believe that genocide is wrong. I believe that Palestinians are suffering a genocide. I personally believe that is wrong. There's assumptions being made about why I'm here by simply standing here with a flag. That doesn't even necessarily go against what most Israelis even want, which is a two-state solution. There is assumptions being made, and the question that's being brought to me is simply, do you agree with Hamas? And it's like, that's an assumption based on just carrying a Palestinian flag that represents the Palestinian people as a minority. But international court justice ruled Israel as committing a genocide. That isn't just me, that isn't hearsay, that is from an international institution. The United Nations, all kinds of international bodies have called on Israel to prevent this genocide. And simply me standing here with a Palestinian flag is enough to inspire all of these people to go against me. Now, what does that say? To me, that says there is more Islamophobia and prejudice against Palestinians, of which people assume that I'm here supporting a terrorist organisation. That is not the case.
How would you make peace?
How do you make peace? I think peace comes with decolonisation. I think peace is a construct. I think when we ask for peace, it depends on what everyone says. I'm stood here peacefully with a flag, waving the flag of the Palestinian people, the people that have just as much a right to this land as anyone else. Jewish people are able to live within a free Palestine. No one's against that. I'm also Jewish myself, and personally I have my own perspective that is also along the lines of Jewish anti-Zionism, and that is my perspective. I've said I've not shouted, I've remained peaceful and calm, I've been called a disgusting individual, even though I think I'm giving a lot of grace to people that are coming at me with a lot of hostility. And that's all I have to say on the matter. I think there should be a free Palestine. And I think when a group calls for a march for Israel after an international court justice has just ruled them as committing a genocide against Palestinians, not just now, but for 76 years, I think that's a problem. And I think the fact that I'm stood here alone with a Palestine flag can garner that much hostility from people that came to be peaceful and claim to care about everyone speaks for itself. And you can speak to Charlie Beach, he claims to be someone that stands, against anti-Semitism. I was with him in Bolton not too long ago when there was an actual neo-Nazi who has just been actually convicted of being part of white nationalist right-wing terrorist groups. And Charlie Beach did nothing. He didn't care about anti-Semitism then. He cared nothing for it. Making the Israel-Palestine issue about anti-Semitism ignores the fact that Israel is not innately tied to Jewish people. I'm a Jew, I do not align with the state of Israel, I don't align with its premise, I don't align with its outcomes. And actually, if you look at religious text in Judaism, it actually argues that, like, you know, we're not even meant to go to this area known as Israel until the Messiah has come. And I don't know about you, but the Messiah has not come. And I would still disagree with that on a fundamental cultural premise. I do not agree that the Jewish people should take the seats of colonizers, which was Britain and France, who took seats of colonized land in Palestine, then after World War II exploited Jewish suffering during the Holocaust to make us defend their colonial interests. I do not believe that is aligned with Judaism. I don't believe that's aligned with peace. I don't believe it aligns with anything.